Hey everybody, mel0n here. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm finally getting around to doing my review of the Razer Deathadder V3 Pro. Now, this was a hard one for me. After my 3 months of use with it, I really actually wanted to love this mouse. Like, on paper, this is technically the perfect mouse for an ergo user. However, there are two really big, just really confusing decisions about what Razer did with this mouse that just ruined it for me, unfortunately. And again, it's disappointing for me personally because while I've had really bad experience with Razer way back in like 2013, I've been really impressed with this mouse, but it just isn't quite there yet. I'll get over the bad issues first, but I want to go over what Razer did right, which is a lot of stuff with this mouse, and let's touch on that first. So first of all, build quality is amazing. Very impressed with Razer's build quality. They've come a long way from 2013. The mouse feels really good in your hand. There's no issues with creaking. I know some users did report some issues over time with creaking, kind of where the base meets the shell. That issue seemed to have not happened to me at all over my 3 months, which is nice, but realistically speaking, the creaking is not that big of an issue. If you're experiencing creaking, you're probably death gripping your mouse. But overall, again, build quality is really good. The weight of the mouse comes in at 63 grams, and the weight balancing is pretty much perfect. I would say maybe just ever so slightly towards the front of the mouse, but overall, very impressed with the build quality. Weight balancing is great. No complaints with that at all. The DAV3 is using Razer's 3rd gen branded optical switches. They actually feel quite nice. They are a little on the heavier side, so you will have a bit of a transition period with this mouse depending on what mouse you're coming from. Overall, though, they feel quite good, pretty spammable. Again, it took me a little while to get used to them, but quite nice. They're not light enough, though, as in previous switch implementations, such as the V2s, where they're so light when you try and move the mouse, sometimes you'll hit them with your other fingers. No issues with that here. In terms of latency, no issues with them. I know opticals are obviously, they're technically faster than like a standard switch implementation, but I really didn't notice any difference between the multiple mice I was using at the time, so no complaints there. They feel nice, spammable, just it may take you a little while to get used to the weight. The scroll wheel on the DAV3 feels really nice. It has a very small tactile bump whenever you scroll with it, and it's very quiet, so it's very almost like a free scroll kind of thing. Feels really good. I had no issues with that. The only odd little tidbit I had about the scroll wheel as a whole is whenever you try to do like click the entire mouse wheel down, it's quite stiff for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. I'm not sure if that's an issue with my unit or that's all of them. Again, for me, it didn't really matter because I don't click the scroll wheel down for pretty much anything, so it didn't matter to me. But if you use that for anything in game, such as scoping or pinging, that's something to keep in mind. The side buttons actually feel very nice. They feel almost similar to the main clicks. They're very nice, very spammable. I will say though, the only issue I really had with them is that they are placed a little high in the shell. So if you, depending on your grip style, if you're running claw or like an aggressive claw, or I mean, if you really want to fingertip this thing, I guess you could, but I really would not recommend it. You may have issues trying to hit it. I know with how this mouse is shaped, I have to do a very aggressive claw grip, and I can only hit the first button. I can't hit the second one, so that's something to keep in mind. But the buttons themselves are totally fine. No problems with them. They feel good. Just again, depending on your grip, that may be a little hard to hit. Now, in terms of the sensor, the Razer Deathadder V3 is using the Razer branded Focus Pro 30K optical sensor. I had really absolutely zero issues with the sensor. It actually felt quite good. I had no issues with desync or any kind of tracking issues across multiple test pads, which is really great. The only kind of issue I have with this sensor is the way it was implemented into the mouse in terms of the 4K polling rate. Now, I'm not going to talk about that right now. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but that is like my only complaint about the sensor. But again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. For me, the highlight of the DAV3 is the battery life. Now, on the website, Razer says they rate the battery for around 90 hours of use on the default 1K polling rate. They were not kidding. The battery life in this thing is insane. I think I've had to charge this thing maybe like in the grand total I've had, I think I've maybe had to charge it like 10-12 times tops. Again, I did use it quite a bit for a couple weeks, so that may be a little more than usual, but the battery life is amazing. I easily get 90 hours on this guy. Now, an important little tidbit here, if you are going to use the separate 4K dongle and the 4K polling rate, that will cut your battery life down to approximately 24 hours, but I was not able to get my hands on one of those dongles, so I am unable to verify that, unfortunately. However, overall, I had no issues with battery life. It was very good, if not better than what was advertised. Alrighty, now on to the cons. Now again, props to Razer, did a lot of things right with this mouse, but there were a couple little odd things that just kind of were a little weird in my opinion. The first of which is the stock skates. Now, for some reason, my set of stock skates were really scratchy. I don't know why. I used them across multiple pads, and I actually checked to ensure that they were rounded edges out of the box, and when I took them out, they're just really scratchy. I don't know why. It was one of those really weird things. I'm not sure if I just got a set of defective skates or if that's just how Razer skates are out of the box, because again, it's been a while since I've used a Razer product, so I wouldn't know off the top of my head. However, once I swapped them out for a new set of third-party skates, the core pads, absolutely no issues. The issue went away completely, so I probably just got a bad set of skates, but that's something to keep in mind. Similar to the skates, the other thing I had kind of had a problem with was the coating on the mouse. Now, this coating is going to be totally fine for 98% of people. However, if you get any kind of moisture on your hands when you play, or if you have a little bit of a sweatier hand, you will need the included grip tapes that come with the DAV3. To Razer's credit, the grips that come with it are actually totally fine. However, I would not recommend them for long-term use. I would highly recommend you swap them out for a third-party set. I personally put a set of core pads on here, and they were night and day difference, but that is something to keep in mind, especially again if you have a little bit of a sweatier hand. You will need grips on this mouse 100%. Alrighty, now as I mentioned before, there were two kind of weird oddities about the DAV3 that kind of turned me off of it. Now this is the first one, the 4K polling rate implementation. The only analogy I have for this is Razer pulled an Apple. When you go to buy a new iPhone nowadays, it doesn't come with a charger, where they're like, oh well, people have a charger already. Okay, sure, but if you lose your charger, you have to go buy another one from Apple. With the DAV3, it was advertised as the world's first 4K gaming mouse. However, in the little asterisk, it says you need a separate dongle to utilize it. Now, this little dongle is going to set you back another 30 USD on top of the 150 USD for the mouse itself. It's going to cut your battery life from 90 to 24 hours, which is cool. Okay, cool. You get 4K polling rate that isn't even really implemented in most big FPS games nowadays. And the worst part about the 4K polling implementation is that you can't run 4K over wired. You have to buy this dongle. It's literally going to an Apple store, it's like you buy a new iPhone, it's like, oh, you can't wirelessly charge that phone until you buy a charger from us. Like, it's literally disabled out of the box. It makes no sense that a wireless implementation of 4K doesn't work on wired. It just seems almost intentional the way it was done. I understand the whole logistics about all this stuff, I get it, but the way it was done just kind of smells a little fishy to me. It'll be interesting to see what happens, because I don't know if this is just Razer trying to pull oh, let's get everyone to buy more of our stuff, or if this was an actual technical limitation. We'll see what happens with the 4th gen. If the 4th gen requires the dongle, it's chalked. Like, Razer is just literally intentionally holding back features. If it's just something for the V3, then okay, fine. But even still though, again, for the price of the mouse, like paying 150 USD plus another 30 to get 4K polling rate is just a lot of money, and it just feels very Apple-ish, which again, I'm not the biggest fan of. Again, you're paying almost 200 USD for a mouse. It should have this stuff by default. And my last little kind of tidbit about the DAV3 is the shape. Now, the DAV3 is advertised as an ergo, which it is an ergo. I give them credit for that. It is an ergo mouse. However, it feels like Razer what took the shape of the Deathadder is like, this is too hard. Let's make it as like NPC friendly as possible. And the shape, because like if you've used the Deathadder previously, such as like the Deathadder V1 or 2, like I have a Deathadder V1 from like way back in 2013. The shape is completely different from what it is today. The DAV3 feels more like an ergonomic version of the GPX than it does feel like an actual DAV3, which is really unfortunate because the shape for me is what kills it. So to kind of explain what this is, I have very big hands. I have about 6.5 by 5 inch hands, so it's kind of hard for me to use a lot of mice. That's why I claw grip a lot of stuff. The hump of the mouse, it kind of, when you start at the front, it has a gradual increase, and it hits the peak, and then it falls, and it has like a soft shape all the way down. The problem is that the hump is so focused towards the center and not the back. I have to basically rest the base of my hand almost at the middle of the mouse for me to actually get a good hold of it. And in doing so, I'm doing this really weird, like super hyper aggressive claw where I'm almost holding the front of the mouse, and it makes it impossible for me to hit the back side button. I can only hit the front, and it's really uncomfortable for long-term use, which really sucks because again, this mouse is literally perfect in almost every single way other than the 4K polling, of course, and the shape is what really kills it. And it's really sad to see because I genuinely think if Razer kept the shape of the previous Deathadders, it would actually be a lot better of a mouse, at least for like personally for people who are looking for ergos. It would be a much more comfortable shape because like I can comfortably claw the V1 Deathadder no problem. The V3 I can't, which is really unfortunate. And again, I just feel like Razer went too safe and they were trying to go against Logitech, like, oh, let's build an ergonomic version of the GPX since Logitech isn't going to do it. We're going to try and do it ourselves. And again, that's why so many people are like, oh, this is the perfect mouse. It's amazing because it's like literally the safest possible shape of all time, which again, obviously it works for most people, but it also screws over a lot of people who have bigger hands. I got it. And again, over my 3 months of using it, I had to try a bunch of different grips to try and get it to work. I was even fingertip gripping this thing at one point to try and use it. And it just, I could not find something comfortable, which is really unfortunate. And then that's why I actually ended up going back to my Vaxi Outside AX just because it was more comfortable in my hand. But again, that's like the big thing that just kills it for me. I can overlook the 4K polling rate shenanigans. I can't overlook the shape because that is just a deal breaker for me, unfortunately. I just realized after reading through my script for this video, I realized that if you short form Razer Deathadder V3 and just take out the Razer and then just short form it, it looks like Dave. Well, I'm going to call it the Razer Dave from now on. The Razer Dave was cool. Overall, I did actually enjoy my time with it. It's just, unfortunately, Dave just isn't the right shape for me. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to end things with Dave after a mere short 3 months. Unfortunately, I don't know if I could return Dave. Probably not, but that's okay. But again, if you have larger hands, I'd highly recommend you go try the mouse out if you can. If you have a friend who has it, or Best Buy and like Canada Computers and Memory Express and all that stuff often have floor models. If you want something comparable in shape, I would recommend waiting for either, if you don't care about 4K polling, I would recommend that you either get the upcoming Zowie wireless mice or the upcoming Vaxi wireless mice. I know the Vaxi Outside AX, which is what I personally use nowadays, and the NP10 and NP10OS are coming to wireless later this year. Those would be something to look into. Unfortunately, they are kind of hard to get an NA, so that's something to keep in mind. Those are the only ones I can think off the top of my head. If there are any other recommendations for similar mice, be sure to put them down in the comments because I can't think of anything else off the top of my head right now, but if there's anything else, let me know. And that's my overall thoughts about the Razer Dave. Again, just it's so close to being perfect, just the shape is just too safe, which is just the worst part about it, but it is what it is. Anyways, I appreciate you guys watching. I hope this helps you out a little bit, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.